Welcome to Future Takes, a series where we ask people for their views on achieving a more reconciled island of Ireland in the years ahead. And today I am very pleased to be joined by Irish language and community activist Linda Irvine. Linda, Fáilte Rót.
Very good.
You work on the ground in East Belfast, the Lower Newtownards Road to be exact, for anybody who knows it. So firstly, I would love to hear what you think, what your thoughts are on reconciliation.
I suppose really it is bringing people together and acknowledging that people have different viewpoints, but not vilifying people because of that. And it's not trying to maybe win them to my cause, but helping them to understand that I'm not out to do any harm and that, what I do is okay. So I think reconciliation is really about that in many ways, about accepting difference, but helping people to come together despite difference.
And what are the soundings in your community? And when I say your community, Linda, to be specific, it's the Protestant Unionist Loyalist or the PUL community.
Well, I think the most important thing to say is, it's not a homogenous community. The PUL community is very different in parts with very, very different views on things. Even within the class issue, working class people, middle class people, people living in certain areas, and I'm just talking here about East Belfast. And then there are people who are still very much, very strongly British and are against the United Ireland, and some people who would probably still be frightened of that option. So I think there's a mixture of views, and that is what you hear a lot of, when people are talking about it. I think the other important thing to remember, though, is it's not something that I feel people are talking about every day. That's the reality. There are much more important things being discussed at the minute.
Why is it, do you think, Linda, that members of the PUL, Protestant Unionist Loyalist community, don't feel that this is a conversation to be having about a shared island?
Well, again, I don't think everybody feels like that. I think there are a lot of people who don't want to engage in the conversation simply because they don't feel that there's any purpose. They're not interested in a shared island. They're not interested in a united Ireland. They're not interested in a new island. So why would they engage in the conversation as far as they're concerned? But there are other people within the Protestant community who are already engaging in that conversation.
How central do you think identity and the confidence to have your own identity is to the question and the issue of reconciliation?
Well, again, that differs. For somebody like me, it's not as difficult because I'm Irish, but I'm also British. And I suppose like somebody in Scotland or England, my Irishness comes first. I find it strange, but there are a lot of people within the Protestant community who reject their Irishness, and I feel that we're born in this island. Of course we're Irish, and to say anything different says that we're a usurper, and I'm not a usurper. I'm a native of this island.
I wonder, as an activist on the ground working in the Irish language, promoting the Irish language in your local area of East Belfast, where does the language come into play on a more reconciled island?
Well, what I've seen with the language, in the work that I do is, I suppose it gives people a greater recognition of their Irish identity in some ways. That doesn't change their political affiliations, but, a number of my learners would say to me that it sort of roots them, when they have a more understanding of the place names, of, what's around them. It gives them a more feeling of a belonging and a rootedness. Somebody said to me one time, they feel like their legs are really steady in the ground now. And I just thought that was a lovely way of putting it. So for me also, what I have seen, people say to me, oh, the language is divisive. I've seen the opposite. I've seen the language bringing people together. I've seen it, becoming a medium of reconciliation, friendships being created, people crossing the city over to West Belfast to go to classes, to go to Culturland, to get a cup and tea or a cup and cafe. We've even had 2 marriages and 3 babies, so do a bit of matchmaking on the side as well. So, for me, the language can play a part in reconciliation, a very important part.
How do you look to the future in terms of a discussion of a shared island, a more reconciled island, in the context of your grandchildren's future?
Well, you know, my aspirations for my grandchildren is that they live in a peaceful country. You know, I would never want them to grow up in the sort of place that I grew up in. So whether that's in all Ireland or we're still UK, if we're at peace with ourselves, if it's UK, I hope that we'll have really good relationships with the South. You know, good working relationships. If it's in all Ireland, then we've good relationships with Britain, and that we can just function as a group of islands in a peaceful, prosperous way.